Good. I don't think I actually like being on stage, so I might come off and walk down in the aisle a bit, but let's see how it goes. So, company culture. So there's a lot of jokes about company culture. This is one of them. I think company culture is very important. It's something I take very, very seriously. And I think all companies should take it very seriously. So especially young companies, especially startups, I think companies should take culture very seriously at the beginning of the company, right when you're forming. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about why that is. I'm going to try to convince you why you should make it a priority. Because a lot of founders I know don't think it's a priority. They don't think it's the most important thing they have to do. There's a laundry list of stuff they have to work on, including product and business model and hiring, and the company culture kind of falls to the bottom of the list or sometimes isn't even on the list. And I think that's actually a dangerous approach and can lead to a lot of pain in the future. So I try to convince you of why that is. But before we get into it, I think I have to emphasize every company has a culture. There's no such thing as a company without a culture. Now, your culture can either be crafted or it can just develop organically. But it will have a culture. And I believe that companies that craft their culture have the strongest culture. I think it's very difficult to actually develop a strong culture organically, which is why you should focus on it very early. So before I talk about culture, I want to talk about what it is. I want to define it. And to do that, I'm going to start with what it's not. Right? So culture is not a foosball table, it's not free food, and it's not beanbags. Okay? These are not an expression of your company culture, these are perks. And unless the perks serve a purpose, they are just bribes. You're just bribing your employees to work for you. And that's not a particularly great culture to have. Right? So when you think about perks, you should think about how they express your values as a company. I'm going to come back to that later on in the presentation towards the end. So when we talk about what culture is, I break it down into 3 areas, right? So there is values, mission, and team. So I'm going to go into each one of those now. So values. This is a value at Facebook, right? Done is better than perfect. So what does this tell you about Facebook? Anyone? You can just shout out. High pressure, okay. I would actually say if you value perfectionism, that's higher pressure. But yeah, maybe you interpret it as a high pressure place. Other people would say that they know that what's important is getting things done, not getting them perfect. And this is a place where if you're a perfectionist, you're probably going to have a lot of issues because people are going to be shipping product all the time that doesn't meet your expectations or your standards. So it may not be a great place to work for you. This is just a value. You don't have to like it. You don't have to have it be your company culture. But it is a value. And the reason why it's a good value is because it helps Facebook make decisions. It helps them make decisions day to day, and it helps them make decisions long-term strategically. Values in a company, particularly startups, I believe they're an expression of the founder's own value. At least really good values are, right? So it's what the founders choose to care about and what they think will help them make decisions, both day-to-day and long-term. So for example, if you are passionate about the environment and you want to make sure that your company is in line with that belief, that becomes a company value. If you're passionate about the environment, but you don't think it's going to help you make decisions day-to-day, then it shouldn't be one of your company values. But good company values are ones that help you make those decisions on an ongoing basis. Mission statements. So this is Amazon's mission statements. It is, I think, one of the best mission statements ever. If you decode this mission statement, it tells you exactly what Amazon's goal is and how they're going to get there. Right? What they care about is the customer. The customer is at the center of the experience at Amazon. And the way they get there is by having pretty much anything that people want available on the store. So even though they started off with books, they've ended up as the world's store. And that's what Amazon is now. It's been their mission statement for a very long time. So even when they were just focused on selling books, this was the goal. And it helped guide what people were doing on a day-to-day basis, on an ongoing basis. Really good mission statements help express the purpose of a company, right? It's the goal of a company. And why is that important? Well, it's important because without companies having goals, without them having a purpose, they're really just a place where you work. And if it's just a place where you work, it's quite easy to give up on it, right? Startups are hard. Startups are really fucking hard. So if your company doesn't have a purpose, if you don't know why you get up in the morning, I guarantee you no one else at your company does either. So having a great mission statement helps everyone understand what they're doing every day and why it's important both day to day and in the long term. Team. Culture and team, there's sort of three things you can do there, right? So there's who you hire, who you fire and why, and what the reasons you have for promoting them are, or for rewarding them. And I want to, just one note here. There's been a lot of controversy about using cultural fit as a reason not to hire someone, whether it's race or gender or economic background. I think that's using cultural fit in a very negative way. All right? It's using cultural fit as an excuse, not as a strength. When you use cultural fit as a strength, you find people that share the values of the company and that believe in the mission statement. And what that creates is a team that works well together. So the goal of cultural fit is not to create a team of clones, right? It's to create a cohesive working environment. And that's important because if you have a team that doesn't get along, if you have a team where the people are smart and experienced, and they're very skilled, but they don't share the values of the company, and they don't believe in the mission statement of the company, there's a very high probability you're going to have tension and infighting on your teams. You might have it anyway, but at the very least, having a cohesive team tries to reduce that. And so why is that important for you as a founder or a CEO? Well, if your team isn't getting along, if they're not working well together, it's highly likely they're not as productive as they can be. So even if you don't care, you should, but even if you don't care that your employees aren't getting along with each other, at the very least, you should care that they're being productive. Also, having teams that don't get along makes it hard to hire other people. Because when you walk into a workplace, you can tell if those people don't like each other very much. And most people don't want to work at a place where the people that are there don't like each other. There's a negative energy, and you feel it right away. So focusing on people who work well together is important. Now, so that's, for me, company culture, right? It's values, mission, and team. I was talking to a friend of mine, David, yesterday, and he said the thing with company culture is it's not something you can write down and put on the wall. I mean, you can, but that's not really what a company's culture is. The best way to find out what a company's culture is to observe people's behavior. So if you say we really care about the environment, and that's a core value of the company, but there's a very big revenue opportunity, and you decide, and it's with a company that's, I don't know, in logging, and it's, deforesting some area, and you decide to do the business deal anyway, that's really your company value, right? It's the actions in the company that say what a company's core values are. It's who you hire, it's who you fire, it's not who you say you're going to hire and fire. So it's very much about the behavior of people in the company. That's the expression of company culture. So why is any of this important, right? Why should you care about company culture when you've got product development to deal with, and you've got a business model, and you've got much more important things to do, like strategic partnerships? Right? It's because company culture is a guiding light. It's the North Star for your company. It helps you make product decisions. It helps you make team decisions. It helps you decide which part of your company you should be focusing on. If customer service is the most important thing in your company, then that's the part of the company that you really need to build out. And you need to think about what kind of product development you need to do to make sure your customer service is the best it can be. You need to think about what kind of returns policies you're going to have if you want to ensure a great customer service experience. Without the guiding light of knowing that customer service is core to your company, you don't know how to prioritize all of the things that are going on in your product roadmap. So I'm a big believer in this, because I think if you have worked at a startup, or if you're working in a startup now, you know that there's thousands of decisions you have to make pretty much every day, or at least every week, right? And it's really hard to process all of those decisions. And you oftentimes are making those decisions with very limited information. But if you have a strong set of values, and you have a clear mission statement, making those decisions will be easier. They won't always be the right ones. Other people will think you're making the wrong ones. But for you, as the CEO, as the founder, as the executive team, it will be a far better process if you have that strong company culture. Now, I'm a VC, right? So why do I care about the investments I make having great company culture? It's because I think company culture is one of the best things a company can invest in. Right? My job as a VC is to put money into a company and get more money back out. It's a very simple job. It's a very hard job, but it's a very simple job, right? That's it. There was a CEO on stage the other day, and he said, VCs are simple. They like to give one and get more than one back. That's it. And it's actually the CEO of a company I invested in, and he's right. That is the core of what we do. But the other part of what we do is when we give you the one or the whatever it is, I'd like to make sure that it's being spent efficiently. It's being spent well. It's one of the reasons why I focus on very product-centric companies, because I think product is a very efficient place to spend your money. There's a fantastic return on your investment when you spend money on your product development team versus on your sales team or your marketing team. Not to say you shouldn't spend money on the other two, but the returns on those investments are oftentimes not nearly as high. Culture is a great investment. You build the culture very early on, and it doesn't have to cost you any money, right? Culture is not perks. Culture is not giving people stuff so that they come work for you. Culture is making sure people are instilled with the sense of mission, the sense of purpose. It's making sure that everyone on your team understands the values of the company and believes in them and acts according to them. That's not expensive at all. But it scales really well, right? Because every person you add, they believe in that culture, and they join partially because of it. And so it grows with your company, and it doesn't have to cost you anything to do that. So it's a fantastic place to spend your time and effort. Other things about it, right? It helps with decision making. It helps with recruiting, which is one of the hardest things most startups I know have to do, right? If you're fighting with other companies based on salary, you're pretty much fucked. You don't have any money. So if you're fighting with Google or Facebook or whoever, Runtastic, who seems to be doing very well, on salary, you're probably going to lose. But you can compete with them on culture. Culture helps attract the people to you rather than you having to go and seek them out. It's one of the reasons why I encourage all of our investments to focus on it so much. Now, I talked before about perks and why perks can actually be a good thing and how they can actually help you express your company's culture. So how can that be? Well, free food, how can that express your company culture? Well, if you're just giving away food, it probably doesn't. But if one of your core values is, or one of the goals you want is for different people in the company to meet each other and different parts of the organization to interact, having actually free lunch is a great way of doing that, so long as you design the experience in a way that people from different departments interact with each other. Right? So I know quite a few startups who do this, and they actually have these very long tables in their cafeteria. They're not small tables. You can't just sit in your tribe of 5 people. You have to sit at a long table, and you have to interact with other people from the company that you probably normally don't, because you're working on product development, or you're working on revenue, or you're working on engineering or architecture. And this is a great way for you to interact with them. But you have to make sure you're designing the perk around the value that you're trying to express or achieve. So another one that comes up a lot is foosball, right? Why do so many companies have foosball tables? How can that possibly express a company culture? Well, it can, right? Because maybe part of your company culture is that you like to play games. Maybe part of it is, again, you want different people from the company to interact. I'm going to show you a video now, and it's from one of our companies. It's called Space Ape Games. So they're a gaming studio based in London. And they love to play games, board games, video games, foosball. And they also like to hack things, right? They like to take things that exist and modify them and build them to make them more fun or better or just different somehow. So they took a foosball table and they hacked it. And I'm going to show you a short video on that, assuming the video works.
Welcome to Space Ape. My name is Lou, and I want to show you our latest side project, modding of the foos table. We started with a simple leaderboard where we entered our scores after each game. This gave us a record of matches and leaderboard of players. We even have a graph of players' performances over time. With all this data, the system could start predicting scores given the matchup. As the next step, we made an iOS app that sits beside the table so we can use it as a scoreboard. Players sign in with their NFC cards, and the system plays the theme song. Then the app suggests the positioning of the players to have the most even matchup, including who should be attack or defense. We have sensors attached to the goal tubes so the app knows when someone scores. Then the app plays customizable sound effects depending on the game situation.
Double kill.
Our leaderboard system is designed to measure the skill of players over time. It keeps track of how people are doing, and players gain points for beating the odds. This even works as an automatic handicap system. If the system predicts you're only going to score 4 goals, that 5th goal becomes a real victory. All this information is displayed in real time during the game. For every goal scored, players can see a projection how many points they're going to win or lose by the time the game is over. It makes the game a lot more exciting for everyone involved, no matter their skill level. So that's where we're at right now. We've been working on motion detection of the ball, so we have better commentary and stat system. We've also been working on lighting effects to go with the mood of the game. If you have any ideas, let us know. Thanks for watching.
Okay. So it's obviously a fun video, but what does it tell you about Space Ape? What can you learn about the company by watching that video? What do they care about? Oh, don't be shy. Come on.
Win, compete.
They like competing. Well, it's a gaming company, so yes, they like competing. But what else? Improvements, yeah? Creativity. Also data, right? Their starting point was, we're going to track every game and use that data to improve the game. So yes, we're competing, but it's more fair, because it's a more balanced game. So if you think about what they do, they design games. And they design games that are fun to play. And fun to play games aren't just one-sided. They're not just impossible to win at or super easy. Right? There's a concept in gaming called game balancing. They just balanced out foosball. Right? What else? They like to play. Right? It's a fun place to work. But the play is different than other places. You're not just going to hang out and sit on the side, right? They try to think very creatively about ways to play, to make sense for a gaming company. So how does this reflect in terms of a valuable investment, right? Well, they made a video, and they put the video on their website. And guess what happened? What? That's right, yes. People wanted to work there. It attracted people who wanted to work there and attracted exactly the right kind of people. Exactly the kind of people that fit with the team. People that thought playing foosball was fun, but hacking a foosball table is way more fun. Right? That's the kind of people that SpaceApe wanted to come, and making that video did exactly that. Right? So they put it kind of front and center on their website. And they're like now doing more improvements, and there's going to be like a second video and stuff. And anyway, they're really into their foosball table. So anyway, so that was all I had. I guess we have some time for questions. So if anyone has any questions, go ahead.
Can we put on slide on screen 1 and turn on mic 1, please?
You can ask questions about company culture in the presentation I give, or whatever else you want.
Could they
relevant.
Could they share an example of their company culture here?
Sure,
Everyone?
if they want to, yeah.
Sitar, as a VC, I think would be educational for everyone here. Do you use company culture as part of your due diligence into a startup? How important is that for you as an investor?
Right, so we invest at the seed stage. And when I say seed stage, I mean it's really just founders. Right, for the most part where we invest, it's, I think 8 out of the 11 companies, it's been just the founders, possibly a couple of interns, maybe an early developer. So they haven't yet built a company culture because it was just the founders. So it's not something we use to determine whether it's an investment. And honestly, it's not like if you say, I don't care about company culture, I'm not going to invest. I just view it as part of my job to convince you otherwise and influence you as to why it is a good investment.
There are questions up voted in Slido. And one voted up high is, do you think there's a methodological way of creating company values? Or is it just the Founders Manifesto?
Right, so I don't think there's a method to doing it, right? So one thing I forgot to mention, this is what happens when I don't bring my notes on stage, is that because I think company values are an expression of the founder's own beliefs, there's no such thing as a right value system and a wrong value system. Okay, if you believe in killing people, then that's probably wrong. But in general, right, if you believe perfection is the way to go, if you want to be like Apple, then that's your value system. If you think done is better than perfect, then that's your value system. Right? It isn't that you're going to be judged on whether it's right or wrong. And I don't think there can be a method to it. I mean, perhaps you can do your own soul searching and say, what are the decisions that I don't ever want to have to make? And if I did have to make them, what side would I be on? Right? So when something's really, really at risk, whether it's a lot of money, there's potential embarrassment, what is it that I value most? So when things get bad, when am I likely to go against my values? And that's, if you can get into that moment, you can probably figure out what it is that's most important to you. These are good.
There is a question in the audience, but let's take the one first because there's 8 votes. How do you motivate employees to stay with you in the long run beyond salaries? Is it really efficient to give them options or shares?
Right. So I'm a huge believer in equity incentives for companies. I know it's not as popular in most European countries. I think the UK, it's getting a lot more popular. But I think options and shares are a great way to motivate people. But, honestly, most companies don't end up being worth anything. And I don't think anyone has any illusions about that. So when you give people options and shares, what you're really giving them is that kind of 0.1% chance that they might hit the jackpot and make some money there. But it's a low probability. But what you're saying to them is that we value you and we want you to be here long term. And I think that statement says more than the shares themselves or the amount of shares. But the other way, I think, to get employees to stay with you in the long run is to make sure that they're working on something that they care about, that it's not just a job, they're not just there to collect a paycheck, which is why I believe the culture is so important. It's because if you have a mission that the employees really care about, that's a huge driver for you to stay there and accomplish it.
There's,
Yeah.
The question I have is I'm old enough to remember, in the old days that people were measured just basically on their productivity and whether they came to work on time and basic stuff like that. My question really is, do new companies, as they age, as cultures become more defined, more detailed, even taking on almost the elements of a religion, do those companies expose themselves legally to civil rights questions about, well, now you're putting on an overlay beyond the basic metrics of evaluating the work of an employee? I guess I have the feeling that corporate cultures are very important. I've been in many companies and have worked with those, and I think they're fundamental to the growth of a company. But I think over time, as again they take on the trappings of religion, we're going to find that corporate cultures, and particularly in an age of transparent media, your interaction in your private life, blending and kind of bleeding over into your professional life, that in the next decade, this will be the civil rights issue that we have to deal with. That the culture has become part of your performance evaluation.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, so I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to comment on any of this legally. I suppose it depends on what kind of culture you've defined, right? I mean, if the culture you've defined is, done is better than perfect, maybe my imagination is lacking. I find that hard to get into a civil rights discussion based on that. But when I talked about
I guess what I'm saying is that these things can be taken to logical extremes.
Yes.
And of
Absolutely.
course, humans have a habit of doing that.
Yeah, and one of the issues, for example, when I talked about team, is a lot of companies seem to be using cultural fit as an excuse to not hire people of a certain race or of gender. And that's, I think, a very poor use of, I don't think that's culture. I think that's, using cultural fit as an excuse, as, something to blame. And I think that is potentially dangerous. But if your culture is very religious about you don't hire people of a certain race, I think you have much bigger problems as a company than a lawsuit.
When I say religious, I mean it in a broad way. I mean, and also, I mean, I know in large corporations, now there is a real issue about people doing things, tweeting, Facebook, and that they always are actually being asked by their companies to be transparent about who they work for. Mm-hmm. So, and of course, with the internet having a very, very long memory, once you state something, that remains part of your handle in a sense. I mean, whether it's actually literally on your identifications, so that again, these things bleed into one another, and it's the end of privacy.
Mm-hmm. That wasn't a question, though, so I don't really have anything to say about that. It's an interesting point, though.
Yeah.
Other questions?
There's an important question, I think, that is getting more and more important for more startups, which is, what do you recommend for teams working in remote locations?
Teams working in remote locations. I think it's definitely difficult. If the entire team is just spread out, so you don't really have an office, that's not an issue I've ever dealt with. It's not the kind of company structure I like, and we've never invested in a company that has that structure. I think it's very difficult to build businesses where everyone's remote. But that's not usually the problem most companies face, right? Most companies face we have an office and now we have to start a second office. And how do we make sure that second office isn't just a satellite office? How do we make sure they also are part of, culturally part of the team? And I've had this experience with a few companies, and one of the best ways, and it's not easy at all, but it probably is the best way to ensure that you're spreading out your culture and you're making sure everyone belongs, is for one of the founders to open up the office. And I've seen that happen a couple of times with a lot of success. So one of the founders opens up, or one of the very early team members who has been, it's probably a strong word, but indoctrinated into your culture, for them to go over and open it up. So one of the companies I've invested in previously, it's based in Berlin, is called SoundCloud, and they have offices in London, Bulgaria, San Francisco, and New York, in addition to Berlin. And the one in Bulgaria came in through an acquisition, but the others, it was either a very early employee, or it's come in through the founder going out and starting up the office. And that's worked really well.
Star, the next question is it smart to fire a key member of your team if they don't fit the company culture? E.g., create conflicts in the culture.
Right, so firing people if they don't fit your company culture. Well, ideally, you kind of figure it out before you hire them. That's the best way. But if someone joins and they're not fitting in, and again, this is not a way to just fire people you don't like. That's not the point of company culture. But no matter how smart someone is, no matter how good they are at what they do, if they make other people uncomfortable or if they create tension in the team, I think long term, that's a very big problem on your team. It's a problem for productivity, it's a problem for cohesion, and it's a problem for employee happiness. So I do think cultural fit is something you have to take very seriously. Again, not an excuse to create a clone team, but it is a way to another dimension. And I know for hiring, the best companies I know, they look much more at cultural fit than they do at skills and experience. And they'll actually hire someone who's less skilled or less experienced, but fits in really well in the team. Yeah, Gabby, you can just yell.
I get the mic. Thank you. So a lot of these startups are interested in scaling their products, scaling their business.
Can you keep the mic higher? Thank you.
Okay. They're interested in scaling their business, scaling their product. Have you seen anyone or any techniques for scaling their culture in the same way?
Right. So it's a great question. One of the best techniques I've seen is actually when you have to expand offices. How do you expand the culture as well? So that one I think stands, which is you send an early employee or a founder. But the other thing to keep in mind is as you scale up your company. So I didn't make this point in the presentation because I don't have that much time, but culture isn't static, right? And what worked your company culture when it was 20 or 25 people or 30 people may not work when it's 200. So it's not necessarily true that you should scale your company culture. I think you should let it evolve. You should let it evolve in a state that makes sense for the stage of company you're at and where you're at. Is that cool? Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Marcus from Epigami Online Education. And my question is, how important do you think is spending spare time together? Like my partner likes shopping, I like doing real fun stuff. Do we have to force one another to share some Saturday or Sundays?
You're talking about your founder partner, right? Not
yeah,
like
founding
your
partner.
Okay, right. Okay, just making sure. I mean, if you don't want to spend time with your life partner, you have bigger problems.
I think he means founding partner,
yeah,
not life partner.
He does.
Founding partner.
He does, right. I don't think it's important, actually. You're starting a business, right? It's great if your co-founder is your friend. It's not necessary, right? You don't have to be friends. I think the best co-founding relationships are friends. It's dangerous because startups don't work out and they're super stressful and you can lose a friend in addition to a co-founder. And I've seen that happen. But it's not necessary, and you absolutely should not force it because it's just awkward and weird. If you're like shopping with someone on the weekend and that's not really what you want to be doing. So I would definitely not force it, but if you want to do it, it's great. And I think if you've created a kind of cohesive team, you'll see people just hanging out on their own and becoming friends. But it's definitely not like let's all go get beers on a Friday because it's fun. I don't think you should kind of inflict it on people. It's not punishment. Yeah.
You've talked a lot about letting the culture.
All right, can we take in between a question which is voted up and been there for a long time? Are there some values that most successful startups share? E.g., focus on getting things done, as in case of Facebook.
Right. I love this question, and I have a much longer answer to it, which I'll say at the bar, but the short of it is no. I don't believe there is any common pattern. If you look at successful startups, they have nothing in common other than they were lucky. There was a lot of luck involved, not much else. What I look at much more is why did companies fail? And there you do see patterns. Right? Looking at the patterns of successful companies is just it's a waste of your time and probably like an ego exercise. Look at companies that failed and see why they failed, and there you'll see patterns. Sorry, he was next.
You've talked a lot about letting the culture emerge and just wait for it. But if you were to spend effort on it, is there anything apart from thinking and trying to define yourself that you can do actively spend effort on a ritual or anything that reinforces the culture? Daily things you could do, weekly things you could do, actions.
Yeah, so actually, maybe I wasn't clear, but I'm not a fan of just letting a culture emerge. I don't think it should be organic. I think you should be doing things to actively craft a culture. So defining your values is step one, but then you have to express the values somehow, right? So with Space Ape, for example, they like hacking on things. So actually creating the opportunity to do that and saying like, okay, it's still work hours, but let's play around with the foosball table is actually actively doing something it's saying that we do this, we don't just say it. And I think for all of your values, you should make sure it's not just something you say, but it's something you do. And in terms of what it is, it depends on your values. So like, if you want people in different parts of the company to interact, one of the best stories I heard is, and you can only do this if you're designing your own building, but I believe it was Pixar. So the Pixar building was actually designed by Steve Jobs, who is the chairman of the company, right? And they designed it so that the bathrooms were in this terrible location. They were like in the center of every floor. So no matter where you were, you had to walk all the way to the center where the elevators were. And the reason he did it is because then everyone had to go to the bathroom in the same place. You couldn't just go to the bathroom next to your desk. And there was only one bathroom on each floor, maybe only one bathroom in the building. So everyone in the company interacted in the bathroom. And it worked. You would have conversations as you were leaving or entering or washing your hands or whatever. And it was the same with the company cafeteria, right? So you said, okay, this is important for us. It's valuable that we're not siloed in our development of product or technology or creative, whatever it is. We're not siloed. That's great to say, but what do you do about it? And that was their way of doing it. And there are other ways that don't involve making buildings, so. Yes. Let me know when we're out of time. So.
Do you have any experience or advice around companies who merge or get acquired and have different, disparate cultures, how this could work out?
I don't have experience with that.
I have.
You have, and it wasn't good, was it? So,
no.
Yeah, I guess it depends if it's a merger or an acquisition. I think when it's an acquisition...
It was a merger of equal.
Yeah, those are so non-existent. They're like unicorns. There's no such thing as a merger of equals, really, right? There's always an acquirer and there's always an acquiree, and I think the company being acquired doesn't really have a lot to say, but it depends, right? So when Pixar was acquired by Disney, one of the reasons they did that is because they knew they weren't good at making films anymore that are animated. And they put John Lasseter in charge of the entire animation division. And he has a huge influence on the culture of the company. And it was done partially because of that. So it depends, but usually, yeah, the company that's acquired is, it has to kind of adopt the acquiring company's culture.
Sitar, there's actually a follow-up question to when you mentioned it's possible to see patterns. The question is, what are the patterns of cultures of failing companies?
Right. So there's a lot. One of the ones I see the most is hiring. So not hiring well. Another one I see a lot is not making enough decisions and not making them fast enough. I'm talking about startups specifically, not large companies, right? So startups are faced with decisions all the time, kind of on a daily basis. And the best founders I know make the decisions. It's very tempting to wait for more information and gather more information and gather more information. And that's kind of an endless process. And there is a point at which you have to say, look, I have enough to make a decision. And the best founders I know will do it on very limited information. And they might be wrong and they just course correct. But they are constantly making decisions. And I think that mentality, that personality of constantly making decisions and then figuring out if you're right or wrong and correcting them is a great thing. So I guess could be a pattern of success, but really it's the opposite that I see as a pattern of failure, where people are just unwilling to decide on things, and things go for and everything from product roadmap to hiring is one of the ones where people just refuse to make a decision. So go months and months with an open position. So that's one of the ones I see. And there's more, but we can probably talk about it at the bar.
We still have time for a few questions. There's one which is interesting, and I'm not sure if it's possible to answer. how difficult would it be to change an established culture that isn't attracting top talent?
Ooh, that's tough. If you're not attracting top talent, there's a number of reasons it could be. It may not just be the culture, right? So you have to kind of be honest with yourself and ask yourself, why aren't we attracting top talent? Maybe it's the culture. Maybe it's because no one likes your product and no one wants to work on it. And that has nothing to do with the culture. Maybe it's the founders. In which case, if you're the founder, that's a particularly difficult realization to come to. So there's a lot of different reasons. But if you find that it is the culture, then I think it depends on the structure of the company. But if you've got strong founders or a strong executive team in place, then it should, I won't say it's easy, but it's absolutely something you can do, right? You just sit down and say, okay, what are our current values and mission statement? And you probably don't have one, but what are they? And what is it that's wrong with them that's not helping us attract talent? It's a kind of a difficult analysis to do because people rarely tell you, I don't want to join your company because I don't like your culture. I don't know how often people actually give that feedback, but trying to get that feedback or infer that feedback is pretty important. Okay? Any more questions?
Yeah, one that has already 5 votes. Oh. How open shall we be to the outside world? Is it a good idea to disclose salaries and such?
Right, so I guess it depends on the values you have as a company. So again, it just depends on how much you value transparency. We have one company that it's completely transparent. The budget is in a Dropbox and everyone can read it. So they know what each other are paid. The board meeting happens in the same, there's only one room in the company, and we have our board meetings there. So they overhear exactly what's going on in the board meeting. And if we have a particularly tough board meeting with the founder, the team knows it. So that founder really values transparency. We have other teams that just think about it differently. And again, I think it's something that you have to come to yourself, but it has to be something you're comfortable with and you're willing to commit to. Like any value in a company, if you're not willing to commit to it, you will often act counter to it. And when you act counter to it, everyone in the company knows that that value is bullshit, right? Unless you actually commit to it and you kind of live by it, it's not really a value of the company. So I'd say if you're going to be transparent, kind of go all in and really commit to it, or define the limits of the transparency, but then stick to them.
Sorry, I have to smile a bit. There's a very interesting question. It's a bit of a paradox. Would taking on irrelevant or bad advisors or investors damage your company culture? The question is, why would you take them in the first place? But yeah, would it?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of, there's a problem that's probably more important than your company culture that you need to solve right there. I don't think so. I mean, ideally, your investors or advisors shouldn't be that influential on your company, right? You're the founders or the executives of the company. The investors shouldn't be micromanaging what you do. They shouldn't be telling you, this is how you hire or this is what you should be doing. You should set that. Now, if you have a, I guess, bad advisor or investor who tries to interfere a lot, you have another problem and it's not company culture, and you should deal with that problem, which is that you have a troublesome or meddlesome investor. And that's the problem you need to solve first. Because even if you can shield your company culture from them, it's, that's not going to solve the problem you have. Okay.
Should we take one more, or?
You can do negative voting.
Well, you can downrank a question when you don't want to hear it. So
wow,
it means more people said they don't want to hear it than the person who asked it. Okay, let's take one more, then end the session if it's okay for you. As someone who's naturally competitive, I've seen this behavior be embraced by my peers, both in my company and at hackathons I've been in the lead in. What would you recommend to change that?
Okay, I'm not sure, so it's anonymous, so I won't be able to ask for a clarification, but I'm not sure. Is the problem that you think it's too competitive? Right, okay, anonymous. What would you, what did you mean?
Anonymous, just get tagged.
I just headed Startup Bus, and our team came second, so woo!
You're so competitive. You gotta just tone it down.
The issue was essentially the competitors, I think, made me not want to communicate with the other teams that were there. And I feel like I've definitely missed out on that because I haven't made as many friends as I could have.
Right.
But at the same time, I think we've done well because we came second.
Right.
So where's the balance? And my team members as well, they didn't make any new friends whatsoever. So I felt really bad that they've attended and they've placed well, but they haven't gotten as much out of it as possible. What would you recommend to change that or deal with that?
Right. Well, I mean, you value winning. Right? Like that's your value system. You value winning. If you valued making friends, that would be your priority. And so to change that, I think you either have to care less about winning or care more about making friends. But if neither one of those happen, then you're following what you believe is most important. And for your team members, are they competitive?
I think they're normally naturally competitive, but I think they got more competitive because of
you. Yeah. It's up to them, right? Whether you want to make friends or not. You didn't stop them from doing stuff, did you?
No.
No. Okay. Good. Okay. Just making sure. But that's your value system, and so you care a lot about that. And there are companies out there that are like that, right? They're super competitive. They want to be number one. They tend to be much more secretive, and that's the culture of the company. Right? Apple has a very secretive culture, right? But that's the culture of the company. And if you kind of want to be open and transparent and tell everyone about what you're doing, that's probably a terrible place for you to work. But because it's a strong culture, you know that going in. So you have to be ready to embrace it. Okay. So just embrace your competitiveness, man.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome. Okay.
Shall we finish?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, before leaving the room, there's an important announcement, but please give it up for Sitar Teli.